Okay, so you should all be seeing my screen, and today we're going to be going through how to use MYOB Exo Job Costing. Obviously, most of the people on the webinar have been using Exo Job Costing for some time, so we won't necessarily go through the super basic stuff. I'll try to take you through, I guess, some more advanced hints and tips in terms of how you can navigate around, do different types of transactions, correct errors, and we had a few people asking about how to do maintenance of assets, so I'm going to cover that off as well. So MYOB Exo has a whole range of modules, and most of you would know this. The job costing module integrates with financials and inventory. It has a sub-module called serviceable units that we're going to look at, and that's where you can do maintenance of assets, whether they're your own assets or other people's. And we've also done integration with the fixed asset register, which is where you manage your depreciation schedules and things. So I'm going to take you through how that works. There's also integration with CRM, so in fact a job can start as a opportunity or a quote in CRM and then become a job. So I think that's where we might start and then go through some finer points of each of those as we go through. All right, so I'm on our demonstration system, on our demonstration server, logged on to the job costing module, and I'm going to open the CRM module as well. So you may not be using the CRM module, but it's worth just being aware of what can be done in the CRM and how it flows through to job costing. So CRM module allows you to manage opportunities, and opportunities are potential sources of revenue, and in most of your cases, those would be jobs. You can create an opportunity for any customer, but you can also create an opportunity for a prospect. So that's something that you can't do in the job costing module, is do a quote for a company that's not a debtor. So I can even create a new one on the fly and say, this is my, we'll call them ABC management company. I'm just going to put in their very basic details, just enough information for me to get a quote across to them. And I'm calling them a non-account or a prospect. I can create a new contact. And copy the details from the company. So now I've got a person I'm dealing with. You then have an opportunity type, which might match your job type, lead source. So we can say they found us through the website and the stage is qualified. Notes are fabricate a then we've got our when do they want it, so estimated date of supply, we'll make that 31st of March, And the due date for the opportunity is usually when are we expecting to get that purchase order, so we'll say that's Monday. If I save that, now I've got a new opportunity number, and the quote tab you'll see is identical to the job costing quote screen. So this is where you can add in any items that you might quote. So to make the shed, we need 35 cubic meters of steel at 45 a cubic meter, and we mark it up 50%. And we need labour, 100 hours costs us 45 an hour, and we charge that out at 60 an hour. So we've effectively got a very, very simple job quote. Can see down the bottom my total cost value, my total sell value, total quote markup margin. Could print that, email it to the prospect, and those can all be formatted in the system. And then if that goes ahead, we can convert that to a job. So in this case, it's saying we need to convert the company to a debtor. So yes, we want to do that and convert everything to a job. So now where it opens the job costing screen, all the information that we had entered in the opportunity, name, description, contact person, company, quote information, and I'm going to change that to a T for time and that for a P for purchase. So if we save that, gives it a job number, closes off the opportunity. So we're going to go back to CRM, close that opportunity off as 1, and that updates all your CRM pipeline in terms of quotes won or lost, and gives us a job in the job costing module. So that's something that not everybody does or uses, but certainly can be a very useful way of tracking quotes, and in particular doing quotes to companies that are prospects, not yet customers. So in the job costing module now, I've got statuses that I can use, types and categories, so they can all have been defaulted. I can put in my planned start date, so I'm going to start it on the 2nd of March 2020, and it's due for completion on the 31st. Just with the start and due date fields, they seem like a minor thing, and a lot of our customers don't use them, but a number of search screens and dashboards and reports work better if these fields are used. So I'll show you a couple of examples of that. And a couple of minor things you may not be aware of is that you can drill into the debtor account from the job quote screen. So, for example, this is our debtor. We've just got somebody joined the webinar, so thanks for joining us. I'm just going to mute the audio for you. We've only just kicked off in the last 5 minutes, so hopefully you'll pick up where we're at. So we've just created a new job via the CRM module by doing an opportunity and a quote, and then converting that to a job. Couple of just navigating things that people aren't always aware of is from this job, without closing the screen or going to another menu or module, you can drill into the debtor account. So if you click on the account name at the top of the screen, it opens the debtor account where you can access other information about that client. So that might be how they pay you, it might be their ABN, it might be additional contact people that you want to add to their account. So we dealt with Bob, the managing director, when we were quoting, but now we're dealing with Graham, who's their production manager, on this job, and we'll copy all the details from the company, update his email address, can sync that with Outlook, which would put that contact person in your personal Outlook address book. You can look at any previous transactions for this customer and, access any of the information about that customer. Every customer's got a jobs tab, which shows all jobs that customer has ever had with you. So I can now pick Graham and make him as my customer contact, add my purchase order number that they have sent me, and start executing the job. The other thing that you can drill into is the original opportunity that this quote came from. So you can, if you have the CRM module, you can access information about the job from CRM, and you can access information about the original opportunity or quote from the job. Okay, you probably all are aware, but not everybody is fully aware of how some of these options work. So we have a stock code, a quantity, a cost, a sell rate, which gives us total. You can move all of these columns around. So commonly you might have something like quantity there, sell price there, markup there, margin there, total there. And then if you right-click, you can save those. You can obviously show and hide different fields that you may find useful. So a common one is quote options. Another one is spread. And another one is line number. So I'll show you what a couple of those do. This is a very simple quote, but if we expand on that and add a bunch of other items, you might want to put them in a different order. So you can do that by using the arrow at the top of the screen, which will allow you to move things up or down. But you can also do it just by changing the line number. So the system automatically puts things in with line numbers incrementing by 100. So you can move things around. So if I wanted to make this the first line, I can just make it 1500, and it will sort it to the top. So line number, we have customers who've got hundreds of lines in their quote tab, so using the green arrows to move things around can be a little bit cumbersome. So updating the line number is actually a pretty quick way of doing it for circumstances like that. Quote options allows you to handle things like variations. So again, that's something that's not commonly used. Every job will have a single quote option here called default, and that gets put against every line in the quote tab. Now, if you wanted to have a quote that allowed them to have optional extras or items that you consider to be variations, then you can handle that a couple of ways. So you can create a new quote option called, we'll call it variation 1. And then we could add some extra items. So it's going to require some subcontract labour, 25 hours, and that relates to the variation. Now, the totals at the bottom of the screen will always update depending on whether you have ticked to include that variation or not. So totals will change depending on whether that's included or excluded. And forms like job cards, quotes, can be customised to show or not show information based on a quote option. So a couple of things there that may not be evident to everybody. Another one is cost groups. So cost groups can be used in a number of ways, and they have a direct relationship to the copy to column over here. So copy to column gives 4 options, N, T, C, or P, and they relate to what's going to happen to that quote line. Where is it going to end up, if you like? So N means nowhere, which kind of means it could be anywhere. T means it relates to time. C means it's a cost and it's going to come from stock. And P means it's going to be on a purchase order. So we commonly would configure cost groups for different things. So we've got materials purchased, which defaults to a P. We've got materials that are in stock, which defaults to a C. We have labour, which defaults to a T. And we've got subcontractors, which also defaults to T. So any line with a T on it is adding to the total hours at the bottom of the screen. And anything with a P on it, we can generate a purchase order for. The purchase order will be from the supplier name over here. And that supplier is populating there because it is the default for that particular stock code. So if we look at details 2, if we look at details 1, so in the case where there isn't a primary or main supplier nominated, then it just pops in the default supplier. So if we add a supplier, those guys will do, then that's what would default if we put that item in again. I'll just update it here. So anything with a P allows you to use the purchase order wizard, and that's available up on the toolbar, generate purchase orders, or by right-clicking and going generate purchase orders. So they both do the same thing. They will look at any line on the quote tab that's marked with a P and put it on a purchase order against the supplier that's in the quote tab. Automatically we'll put the job code in it, and automatically we'll make the branch of the purchase order the same as the branch of the job. You could then add a narrative for extra information on that product. Print the purchase order, email it off to the supplier. And then that line will update. Its color will be purple, and its status changes to a P. So all the status columns start with Q, which means sitting on the quote tab. Depending on what then happened to that item, that might change status. So I'm just going to receive that line in. So receipt all. I'm going to cost that and take it straight through to invoice. So that's now costed on the job, so it moves up. That would be familiar to you all and will appear in the cost tab. Now, I guess some things often come up with jobs where maybe not all of this product is used on this job. So we've brought it in, but it's not all used. So you could have the option where you might want to put some of that back into stock. So how would you do that? When you right-click on a transaction in either the cost tab or the timesheet tab, you have various options that you can then do. You could write it off, you can cancel it, you can move it to another job if there was a data entry error or that part was used on a different job. And they all have a costing impact. So writing off means for whatever reason you can't charge the customer for it, but it's still treated as a cost on the job. Cancelling it would do the same in terms of removing it from the job, but if it's a stock item, it will have the effect of putting it into stock in your warehouse. And if it's a non-stock item, it will kind of just treat the transaction as if it's just an error and shouldn't have been there in the first place. In the case where you consumed some but not all of an item, you could actually split it and say 30. 5 of that we didn't use, so we're going to cancel the 5, save the job. If we now look at that item, there will be 30 on the job that we've just accounted for, and the transaction that we just did to cancel it will, if I look at all, has put 5 into the warehouse. Okay, so I just want to cover off a few ways so you can move transactions around. So you can move transactions to different jobs, as I mentioned. If there's a data entry error, you can do that for one line or multiple lines. So let's say the items that we're taking from stock, I'm going to allocate those to the cost tab. So this method where I'm selecting items from the quote tab and then going marked lines send to cost page has the effect of taking items from stock in the warehouse and allocating them to the job and into the work in progress location. Now it'll only let me do that if we have stock. Looks like we do because no error messages, so all of those items are now in WIP and have been taken from stock. So you can see that item has got -1 coming out of the warehouse, going to the work in progress location. And every stock item has a jobs tab, which shows you what jobs that item is currently sitting in work in progress for. So doing that send to cost page from the quote tab is exactly the same as doing direct material entry from which does the same thing. It'll do a stock adjustment from the warehouse. So we want our universal exhaust, 2 of, does exactly the same as sending it from the quote tab. They're just different ways of doing the same process. When you're looking at the cost tab, it's often not 100% evident where that transaction came from or how it got there, but one way of telling is if the from location is populated, then that means it's come from stock. If the from location is blank, then it means it's been purchased, and you'd be able to see the details of it here. You might also be able to see it's possible to add extra fields that might show also where the receipt was that item came from. But generally speaking, you can easily tell if it's come from stock, it will have a from location. If it's been purchased in via a purchase order or a supplier invoice, then the from location would be blank. So if any of these needed to be put back in stock, they can be cancelled or split. And multiple lines can be moved to another job by going marked lines, move to another job. Same with managing pricing. So if you have all of your cost items and generally speaking you have a markup on cost, then you can go to the cost tab, right click, marked lines, set markup, 25%, and all the sell prices will update to be a 25% markup on cost, which is a 20% margin. So we do see some folks going through and manually updating that one line at a time, but you can obviously select all or select multiple and make various changes to cost type, cost group, margin, or markup for that purpose. Okay, another thing that I will show you that's not commonly known is the ability to create filters. So we've got a little filter tab over here on every tab of a job. And the filter tab allows you to show or hide different information on whichever screen you're on based on conditions. So I'll show you an example. This one is called materials. So by selecting that, the only items showing on the screen have a cost group which includes the word materials, and all the totals at the bottom will update based on that selection. So how that's been done, if I look at maintain filters, is we've got a filter called materials. You choose the field that you want to put a condition on. So we've said cost group like material. Now, like basically means the word material is in the field, but not necessarily the only word. So that enables you to do things like for this particular job, what's our markup or margin or total cost just for the materials, and that's often relevant to somebody in estimating or who's looking at the job. If I remove that filter, then it shows me all. I've got a comment that one of the people on the webinar doesn't see that option in their screen. It should be there, but might depend on the version of Exo that you're running. That move multiple lines may not be available in some older versions. Certainly if your version is a 2018 or higher, it should be there. The way that you can tell what version you're on is from any main menu screen in Exo. You go Help About, and it will tell you your version. If there's a new version available, then you can then link through your web browser to information about that version. So the use of filters is very handy feature for larger jobs that have lots of lines and you want to chunk down the information. So you could, for example, if I do a new one, labour. So if I click on this field, it then shows me all the fields that are columns in this screen, so I can pick what I want to filter on. So I can say cost group, like, and I'm putting the % field on either side of that word, which just gives the search a bit more flexibility, that it won't care if there's a word or character before the word labour or after. So now I'm filtering on labour versus materials, and I can remove the filter. So you can do that in any tab in a job. Timesheets tab has a filter. The filter that you create, once you've created it, will be available in that tab in any job that you open from that point on. They're specific to your user, so your filters don't show up for other people, but they'll always show up for you on the tab that you created it on. I just want to talk about a couple of more recent scheduling options. So you have a concept of activities or resource allocations. An activity allows you to say, activities can be appointments or tasks. They're designed to be similar to how Outlook handles things, appointments and tasks. You have an activity type, and that's actually an editable list that you can make up your own activity types. But let's just say excuse my typing. Confirm specifications with Graham. So it's automatically linked to the customer, shows their phone number. It's automatically linked to the job. I can assign it to, it's by default assigned to myself, but I can assign it to somebody else or multiple people. It's got a status, a priority. These are very similar to Outlook. And then it can have a reminder like Outlook, and it can have a specific time. So let's say tomorrow. From 9 until And in later versions, you have the ability to send this as an email, which will notify the person that you're assigning this to about the task and attach a PDF with all the details. Now, I don't have my email sending turned on, so I can't send that, but it basically sends that person the email and attaches a task notification document, which tells them about the job or activity they're meant to do. And those can all show up on your task scheduler. So in the calendar view of Exo Job Costing, you have the ability to show the equivalent of a shared calendar. So what you do is, and it's probably not that evident that you can do it, is on your calendar, if you right-click on the column heading, you have the option for the Resources Layout Editor, and that's where you can pick the other people that you might want to add. Once you've done that, you can look at your calendar and should have, so you can click on any day of the week and the calendar will refresh. And if I see that calendar, that's my task sitting there on my, effectively my Exo calendar. Now that I've used my resource layout editor, I've got a plus or minus box at the bottom of my calendar. So when I hit plus, it will show all of the people that I had selected in the resource layout editor, and I could now look at everything they're doing today, and if I hold the shift key down and click 2 days, so today and tomorrow, what have they got on? From any of those appointments, you can drill into the job. And that will open the job. Okay, just wanted to touch on some aspects relating to asset maintenance. So lots of our customers have assets, be they vehicles, forklifts, cranes, buildings, that they do maintenance on and or would like to track costs of. And that can all be done in Exo using the job costing module and the serviceable units module. So if you aren't familiar with the serviceable units module, it's like a mini asset register. It doesn't do depreciation, but it allows you to track assets. And those assets can be your own, or they can be other people. So some of our customers use Exo to do maintenance on other people's equipment. So here's an example of a vehicle. It's got an asset code, it's a Toyota Land Cruiser. You can set up makes, model, and classes for the different types of assets you deal with. And then you link it to a customer. Now, if the asset's your own asset, then you can leave the customer blank, or you could set up an internal debtor, if you like, named your company name, and link it to that customer. Why you might do that is if you open the customer, every customer has a serviceable units tab, which shows all of the assets that that customer owns. I've got this asset to track its usage based on kilometres, so you can set up different measures of usage, and I think it should last 500,000 kilometres. We've just created the asset today. You then have extra fields that you can create. So, for example, you might want to record the VIN number or engine number, serial number, anything that's relevant to the assets that you have or manage for yourself or your customer. Those can be added as extra fields. You can add up to, I think, 30 extra fields on this tab. You can have parent-child units, so a truck linked to a trailer is a way of separating those things. You can have a contact person linked to it, so from your contacts database, you can add a person to it. Now, if that's an internally owned asset, then the contact might be an employee, and that's okay. Contact history I'm going to come back to. Serviceable history relates to jobs. So effectively, the serviceable history is any job that this serviceable unit has been associated with. So I've created a job for scheduled maintenance, and I've created a job for running costs, both linked to this serviceable unit. I can also set up schedules. So a schedule is, for example, how often does this asset need scheduled maintenance? Now, if it's a vehicle, then it might be every 10,000 kilometres, it needs a scheduled service. So you really have three options. You could nominate a specific date that a particular service was due, or you can say when it reaches a certain level of usage, which could be in kilometres or hours, those are usually the common ones, or months, then this service is due, or it could be every, and in this case, we've got too many zeros, every 10,000 kilometres. And then you can create job templates, and the job template can then be used to populate information in that scheduled service job. For some of our customers, we've added some email alerts and automatic job creation when that serviceable unit does become due for service. So if I drill into one of these jobs, the serviceable history, now these are just blank jobs I've set up, but if you're using this feature, you'll see that there's a serviceable units tab on a job, and you'll see that this serviceable unit is attached to this job. You can actually create new serviceable units from within a job, assign multiple serviceable units, or unassign a serviceable unit. And it's really just a way of capturing costs. So, for example, if we had done scheduled maintenance and we did that maintenance ourselves, then we might have required 4 hours of a fitter who worked on that job. So we now know that the maintenance cost of this particular vehicle is $328 for 4 hours done today. Any cost, so whether you do an outside service, once you receive the invoice from the service company, that invoice can be entered to your asset maintenance in the general ledger, but also to this job so that you can track it at a specific asset level without having a very complex general ledger. Same with running costs. So an example of a running cost might be the fuel account, tyres, anything like that. So if we've got an invoice from a supplier, four Dunlop tyres at $250 each, and I know they were for the Land Cruiser. So we've got our running cost job. Okay, so if we go back to our Land Cruiser and look at its running costs, we've got tyres of $250,000 worth of tyres that were incurred off that invoice. So it's just an easy way of using job costing functionality to track internal costs relating to maintenance and running costs of assets. So I could have entered the fuel invoice, any kind of running cost insurance registration. Where the fixed asset register comes into play is we've integrated these two modules. So a fixed asset which is being depreciated, that's what the fixed asset register does. So assets can be added to the asset register. They can be depreciated at straight line or diminishing value, and that's a standard module of Exo. Out of the box, it doesn't integrate with serviceable units, but we have made it do so. So we can say, is it a serviceable unit? If it is, what's its make, model and class? How do we track its unit of measure or its usage? And then by updating that asset, so in fact, the serviceable unit that I showed you a minute ago was actually created when I created this asset in the asset register, and it automatically puts it in there. So it's just a way of making sure that all of these modules work together seamlessly so that you can have assets that you depreciate in the asset register that are also serviceable units for maintenance or asset maintenance perspective. And you might have small assets that don't depreciate, but you can still create serviceable units for those. Okay, so just want to touch on a few dashboard options. So any screen in Exo, you can add dashboards to. You may not all be aware of that. So whether it's the tasks, jobs, dashboard, utilities, any of those can actually have dashboards added to them. So you'll always see this little toolbar here, and the plus sign allows you to add widgets. Now, I often do put dashboards on the task scheduler menu, and the reason I do that is when Exo opens, that's the first screen that comes up. And so I might want to see some snapshot information about jobs rather than have to go to a menu in the first place. So as an example, I've got a job hours versus budget. This is called a pivot widget. So to add any widget to your screen, so let's do it on the dashboards tab as an example. So I've got a layout called service. If I click the plus sign, all of the available widgets are shown to me. I can then choose one that I want to see. So let's say jobs nearing completion. So that will open a screen like that. It will just sort of pop up, not necessarily exactly where you want it. If you click on the purple bar and then move it around, you'll see those yellow arrows appearing in the middle of the screen. And what you do is keep your mouse button held down and move the dashboard until your cursor is over those yellow arrows, and then it will sort of show you where it's going to put the widget. So if I select the left arrow, it's going to put the widget on the left-hand half of the screen, right-hand half of the screen, top half, bottom half. If I choose the middle, then it's going to make it a full screen, but it'll make it a tab. So what's happened there is you can now see I've got two tabs at the bottom, serviceable units due for service and jobs nearing completion. Now, neither of those are all that big, so I'm actually going to change it and make them side by side. once you save that, it will ask you to save that layout. And the reason it does that is you could actually have multiple dashboards. So there's only so many that will fit on one screen, but you might need to see 4 or 6 or 8 dashboards. So what you can do is go back to a blank dashboard tab, and now we'll add job hours versus budget, and overdue purchase orders. So my overdue purchase orders comes up. So now I can save this as a new layout. And then I can switch between the two. So hopefully that makes sense. It shows you how flexible the dashboards can be, just giving you snapshot information on the screen. You'd be familiar with the Favorites tab. It might depend on the version of Exo you're running, whether you see this or not, but recent versions have this side panel, which shows you things you've clicked on recently, as in screens, things that you do a lot, so favorite actions, so things that you access a lot. So the system counts every time you access particular screens, and reports that you run commonly. So it will always put the most commonly run reports at the top. You can hide that or not, so it allows you to maximize your full screen if you need to. And I'll just bring up an example of a custom asset cost report. And this is something that we include in our add-on called Asset Advantage, which is building on the costing of internal assets. So where you've got, these are effectively serviceable units, and for different job types or asset types, we've got different costs in terms of hours, labour, other costs recorded against each asset. Okay, so our hour has just elapsed, and certainly hope that you found that session informative. We've got a couple of minutes if you have any questions. So if you're on mute, feel free to unmute your phone and fire away with any questions. If you prefer to talk offline, then feel free to give us a call or drop us an email. Okay, doesn't seem like there's any questions. Appreciate your joining us this morning, and interested in feedback as to whether it covers the type of content and the type of format that you would like to see. So feel free to touch base with Rachel or Deanne and give us your feedback. we'll be having a webinar every month where we drill into a deep dive into particular modules of EXO. So hopefully you'll join us for the next one. Thanks, everybody.